Justin, how are you doing today?
Good, man. It's so good to be a part of this. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, yeah, man, this is going to be a blast. So we're going to be talking about your new book that just came out. Why don't you tell us just a little bit of background of who you are, a little bit about the book, and then where you're at in the world. So jump into it.
Sure. I mean, I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. I think the gardener's outside doing the lawn, so sorry if there's background noise. But we're in Atlanta, and most people probably know me, I guess, from my time at Mars Hill Church up in Seattle. So we were up there, lived in Seattle for about 5 years. I was communications director up there. So that's where I've gained most of my ministry experience. Before that was in the startup world at a number of different companies. But now I run that church conference in Atlanta here. We got one coming up in about a month. It's actually about to sell out any minute now. But we run a conference for church communicators. And that's kind of my full-time gig these days. And then, of course, the book hit a couple weeks ago, PR Matters. People can check that out at churchprbook.com.
Very cool. So I'm curious, this is off the topic, but you're in Atlanta. Are you into sports? I know you spent obviously time in Seattle. So who do you root for, man? What's your team?
Man, you know what? I am like not the sports guy. I used to have like canned responses for this. So I grew up in Southern California. So I'd always be like, oh no, I'm really into basketball. You know, the Lakers are the thing down there. But then people started asking questions about the Lakers. I was like, oh, well, I mean, I'm not really into it. I just go along because of good food.
Yeah. Now I know you're a taco fan, right?
I'm not the sports guy.
Am I right? Am I right that you're a taco fan? I see you using a lot of taco emojis on Facebook, so there's got to be something there.
Yeah, see, yeah. Now you're talking. Now, if you want to talk food, you want to talk Mexican food, that's definitely my thing. I mean, we probably have tacos 2 or 3 nights a week in my house. So.
What? 2 or 3 nights a week? It's kind of, that's awesome. So my confession, my taco confession, I'm a Taco Bueno fan. You guys have those in Atlanta?
No, I've heard of it. I don't think I've ever had it, but we don't have it out here.
Okay, so it's like if a Mexican restaurant kind of did a fast food chain. That's Taco Bueno, big in Oklahoma, big in Texas. And when I went up to Missouri, they weren't really there. And so now I'm in Kansas City, and we've got one. And so kind of Taco Tuesday is my day to drive about 20 minutes and grab some Taco Bueno. Nice. And we had a storm here recently.
From a Del Taco or a Taco Bell, right?
Yeah. Well, Taco Bell, it's kind of on the playing field of Taco Bell, but it's got like queso and platters and refried beans and rice, but in the Taco Bell kind of genre. So unfortunately, the last storm we have, the roof caved in. And so here recently, I'm like hitting them up on Facebook, their corporate. I'm like, when is the Taco Bueno in Belton going to be open? And nothing. Like, it's going to be months. So I am Taco Bueno list for like months. So I'm a little.
Oh, man, that's no bueno.
That's no bueno. I love it. So anyway, we'll talk about tacos in our other podcast, the Taco Tuesday podcast. It's, I think, launching here pretty soon. So you're in Atlanta. I'm in Kansas City. If you're just joining us, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. So if you throw down there in the comments below where you're joining us from, and then what church that you're a part of. I always love to see the churches that are part of the network here and joining us. And then we're going to be talking about PR, so public relations. So why don't you jump into this? Because some people may just think, Justin, this is all about moral failures, but there's so much more to PR than that. There's social media, there's bloggers, there's protesters, there's all sorts of fun stuff. So just give us a little bit of overview of when you say PR, what all are you covering under that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's like, it's almost like a taboo word in the church world, right? Like churches don't need to worry about PR or marketing even, but I mean, maybe this audience understands, at least on some level, that that's important. But, PR definitely can get a bad rap. You typically think of PR when, politicians are trying to spin something, or maybe a big corporate company is trying to, push something under the rug. And so, you pull in the PR guys to manage that. And certainly it's definitely something that can be abused. But, I like to say, PR really, it's something that your church is doing already, because all it is managing that perception that people have of your church. everything goes into your church's reputation. And so a church needs to manage that well and be a good steward of that well if we really want to reach more people, spread the gospel as far and wide as we can. So when that's all it is, like PR is just managing that perception that people have to make sure that it matches up with the actual reality of who you are and what you believe and what it's like to visit your church and things like that. So it's something that a lot of churches don't think about. They don't have a plan around this at all.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And I know you and I both worked at organizations that have gone through some PR fronts. You would, yeah. So you at Mars Hill, and then I've worked at a mega church as well. And it seems like mega churches always draw the protesters, the bloggers, in a lot of respects, the haters. The church I was a part of had the reputation that if you wanted to be a member, we got your W-2. Like anybody that talked about the church for a while was like, oh, that's the church that requires you to give you their W-2. And like, no. So, and then, we've had, protesters show up, all sorts of fun stuff, topics we could get into as well. And then I also do some work with a pregnancy care center. So that sphere is no stranger to controversy in PR as well. And that gets a little bit heated at times. So I'm curious, again, for those of you watching us, I know we've got some people here from Alabama and Canada, Michigan, all over the place. So curious for you guys joining us, have you guys gone through a PR issue at your church? It could be anything from what we talked about already, some sort of blogger hating on you, negative comments online.
It doesn't have to be a big moral failure type of situation, right? Like it can be anything. Yeah. You definitely need to have a plan in place to handle those negative comments on social media, but you never know when a protester is going to show up, or maybe something happens in your community that has nothing to do with your church, but it's something that you need to respond to. Like there needs to be a plan in place for all of that, but it can certainly go as extreme as moral failures or corruption in the church or something like that. But
yeah, and nobody is expecting a big moral failure or a big crisis, right? Nobody's like thinking, oh, it's going to happen today. But that's unfortunately the hard part is we're not expecting it. So talk to us, give us maybe one big tip about having a plan in place. One big hallmark, because I know everybody needs to go get the book, right? And just get a thorough education on this. But if you had to say, hey, be prepared, and here's one big tip on that front of being prepared, what would be kind of one tip?
Yeah, I mean, I talk more about how, your PR plan needs to be a lot more proactive building up to it. But the really important piece, the one big tip is you need to have a crisis plan in place. And I mean, like I've written down, well thought out plan that you're constantly evolving and working on, because when a crisis hits, if protesters do show up, if a moral failure happens, if, news organizations are knocking on your door, showing up on Sunday or trying to get your comment for a story, you have hours, if not minutes, to respond to this type of stuff. And you don't have time to assemble the executive team, especially on a Sunday, or get the committees together, or even, have time to huddle with your communications team, if you even have a communications team. So having that crisis plan in place, who's going to be the spokesperson? What are we going to say? What are our core beliefs on certain issues? How do we communicate? What channels are these on? And then what scenarios really are we expecting, so that we can kind of play those out ahead of time and be prepared and include that all in the crisis plan. I think that's super important. I mean, I get calls almost every week now because people know my story and my history, and the call usually goes something like, hey, our pastor was just accused of this. We don't even know if it's true or not, but we're dealing with this right now. What do we do? Or this happened, or literally I'm standing in my lobby looking at protesters at the window. And at that point, there's not much that I can do. I can help you craft messages in the moment and things like that. But if you haven't built up a good reputation, if you don't have relationships that you can leverage at that time, it's just going to make it that much harder. And you may actually lose complete control of the message at that point. And then you've damaged your reputation, in a lot of times for the long run. That's hard to come back from.
Yeah, and that you're right. I mean, you need to have a plan in place. You need to get the book. You need to, and then I think beyond that, you need to make sure your team is aware of what the plan is. Like if you're bored and you huddled together or whatever leadership structure you have and you have a plan, but your youth pastor doesn't know what to do if they walk out of a school event and the media's there is like, hey, we just heard your pastor's being accused of this. What do you have to say? Like they don't know about the plan.
It's always the youth pastor too, man.
It's always the youth pastor.
What they want.
It's always the youth pastor. Is that the kind of the subtitle of your book? It's always the youth pastor.
Pure matters. It's always the youth pastor.
Youth pastors, if you're a youth pastor watching the replay, don't hate on us.
We love you. We're trying hard. You're not a real pastor yet, but
we'll buy you tacos. Next time you see us, just mention it, and we'll buy you tacos, and everything will be good. So let's jump into that, kind of some of these other points. Let's talk about negative comments, because reviews are such a big deal in driving people's reputations, driving people's decisions. If your church hasn't had a negative comment yet, either on Google, Yelp, or Facebook, or something similar, it's coming. So
let us know so we can comment.
Yeah, let us know. Is that what you do to market your book? You just make a whole bunch of negative comments.
Hey, buddy, that's a bad comment there from Justin Bean. I don't know who that is. About this book.
We can take care of that comment for you if you buy the book.
That's right.
We're having too much fun. But what do you do? What should a church give us a tip on that when it comes to negative comments? How to handle that? Because I know it's not to get angry back. So what should we do?
It's a tough one. I mean, you definitely don't want to get angry back, but like the problem is the majority of what I see churches do is they'll just hide the comment, or they'll delete it, or they're so quick to ban people just because it was negative or contradicted what you said or what another commenter said, and I get that. Like you definitely want everything to be positive. You might already be in that mindset of like, hey, we got to have a good reputation, so everything needs to be positive. But I think in the long run, you're going to do a lot of damage by being quick to delete and quick to hide and to ban, because these are real people. Some of them might be jerks, but they're real people who need Jesus. And there are other people who will see that as well, and they're looking to see how you're responding. And so if you just delete a comment, if somebody else saw that already, basically what you've told them is, hey, we don't even care about this person. We just deleted it. Wow. We didn't even reply to them. So I always say, 99.9% of the time, even if it's super negative, it's best to reply publicly and leave it there. You don't always have to get into a big debate with people, because that's just not ever gonna work out well. I mean, you can try to push that conversation offline a bit, or you can use certain phrases and things, or even emojis to kind of close the conversation a bit. But you at least want that statement out there of, hey, we heard you, we understand, we may not agree, but we love you, thanks for being here, or point them to other resources that help answer their question or their concern or something like that. But you want people to see that. Same with a restaurant with a bad Yelp review. Don't try to hide it, or don't reply back and get all snarky and defensive, but just be like, hey, we're so sorry that this happened, that you had a bad experience. Why don't you come back? Meals on us. We'd love to make it up to you. A church can learn from that and kind of do the same thing to say, hey, well, like, if you had a bad experience at this church, please, we'd love to meet with you for coffee or whatever. Chances are they're not gonna, they may have just wanted to be a jerk and post a negative comment. And they may never take you up on that offer for coffee, or they may never come back to your church. But at least other people saw that and saw, wow, okay, that's just one guy who had a bad experience. But at least they replied and cared, and they're willing to change and make it right. I mean, that's our core message, right? That we're all broken, sinful people who need Jesus. It doesn't mean that we need to portray a perfect facade all the time, right? We just need to be candid and open and transparent.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's so important. For you guys that are watching, even if you're watching the replay, I'm curious how you approach comments. And if you let us know too, do you have comments turned on? Do you guys ignore people? Do you hide people? Are you still trying to figure out what to do? Are you proactive in getting positive comments? Would love some feedback on this, because I know comments and reviews are such a huge deal. What you've done in the past, and even if you have a story of how you've responded, that's really worked good for your church. But that's such a good tip and I've read some scientific research on the fact that how negative reviews can actually, if they're responded to the right way, can actually help you, because everybody knows that there's haters out there, right? And how people respond to that really instills either trust for me in a brand, or like, oh, they just hit it, or they're jerks back, or whatever that is. So that's a great tip.
In particular, right? Because think about it. When you go to buy something on Amazon, you check the reviews. When you go to a restaurant or a church, you check their Facebook reviews. You never go and read all the 5-star reviews. Those are just fanboys who love the product and they're going to rave about it, and you know it's going to be good. They give it 5 stars. What you do is you jump down to those 1-star. You want to read those. I want to know about the guy who found a cockroach in his taco. Like that carries way more weight than the people who love their meal. But if I scroll down there and see that, and I see the restaurant reply back and be like, hey, next taco is on us, and it's going to be cockroach free, we swear. It's a horrible example. But if I see that response, then that's going to carry a lot more weight. That's going to change my mind, my perception about it. In way better than the 400 5-star reviews. Yeah.
If there's a leader, I kind of think of this, if there's a leader at home who owns it and will solve it, that's a brand I can trust. Because I'm like, okay, they're well led, and everybody's going to have mistakes, but that's a really good point. So let's jump into, I'm curious, protesters. That's another big topic. Again, it's kind of one of those that if you haven't ever experienced it, stay tuned. You're probably, that's pretty hot and happening nowadays. But what's your thoughts on protesters?
I love protesters. Welcome them. I think they're great. And I think it's a little absurd. I've never seen a protest in the way that they're done today really end well or change minds or do anything. But it's definitely going to happen. It's happened to us a number of times, and I've definitely helped other churches and coached them through it as well. So, I mean, if you're preaching the Bible at all, there's going to be some controversy with that, right? And so people are going to take issue with this, especially in today's world. Any church that takes a stance on, homosexuality, same-sex marriage, things like that, abortion rights, anything like that, big controversial issues, you're definitely going to draw some protesters from time to time, especially particularly in kind of bigger areas. So I don't know. I mean, the same theory applies. Like, these are real people. People are going to be watching how you react. They're going to be watching how the whole scenario unfolds. I mean, there's things you need to be aware of. Like, I mean, if protesters show up at your church, you should definitely call the police, not to have them removed in any way. Chances are they're going to be on the sidewalk on public property anyway. There's nothing you can do, but you do need protection there. I mean, people are arriving with their families and getting their kids out of the minivans and stuff. And we've had protesters who have thrown food and rocks at kids as they're just trying to come into church. And that's not cool. And that's where, the police presence is going to be helpful. But you want to reach out to these people and love it. I know one thing we did at Mars Hill, we had a little bit of a fun time with it, but Westboro Baptist Church put out a press release at one point saying that they're going to protest our church. So it was nice of them to give us a heads up. But, they, in their press release, I forget what their issue with us was, but they basically said that they called us a whorehouse, and they said that our pastor was just a blind prophet and we were all his lemmings following him. So we actually printed out posters that said, Westboro Baptist Church, we welcome you to our whorehouse. We're this blind prophet and his lemmings will welcome you with grace and donuts. And so we actually got donuts and some free books and coffee and stuff. And, we welcomed them. You can actually look up on YouTube. There's some videos of the protest, and you can see a couple of the protesters actually grab the donuts and stuff. So, it helped diffuse the situation. It was so absurd that they were there and protesting. God knows what their issue was at the time. But it kind of just helped make it a little lighthearted. Obviously, it may have made them a little more angry that we didn't take them seriously and listen to their concerns. But in that context, in that moment, there was no debate to be had. There was no conversation to be had. We were open to that, and we were out there, willing to talk to them. But really, we just wanted to keep the situation calm and lighthearted, and really the safety of our families was the first priority. But those are things that we had written policies in place for. I mean, we had a protester plan, what to do. Your lead pastor should not walk out there in front of a TV camera or people with their cell phones up and make a statement. You need to have in place, like, if someone's going to make a statement, who's it going to be and what are they going to say? That should already be done, like, today, before there's ever any chance of protesters that show up. So, and if somebody approaches you, if somebody comes up to you with a camera or a phone or something, you should know, hey, direct all questions to this person, and have a path and a policy in place that, you're right, everyone needs to know about. Particularly all the staff and kind of key members should know what the plan is and who to direct them to. Yeah,
that's so good. Jonathan Hardy here says, "Donuts solve almost anything." So I think
Amen,
that is
brother.
true.
Yeah.
You just need to have a section of your next book where you just have these one-liners, just things to keep in mind during a PR crisis. Donuts solve almost anything. It's always the youth pastor's fault. Just those one-liners, just keep that real. But kind of the common theme through all of this is don't wait for the crisis to hit. Be prepared now, have a plan in place, have steps in place. I was on a conference call here recently with pregnancy care centers, and they were just talking through just that. Like, there was one center that had just dealt with a crisis, protesters. Everybody else was learning that step 1, 2, 3, call the police, have your spokesperson, have the team aware, call some other local community leaders. So it was like a boom, 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 boom. And do that now. Don't wait till, like, hey, I'm going to call Justin and Dean. They're all outside my window. What do we do? So,
or you've got one person following the plan and you've got another person doing something different. You're preparing a statement while some guy's out there talking to the press, or you've got, someone telling the police one thing while you're telling them another. And situations, especially kind of heated, crazy ones, can definitely get out of hand really quickly. And then you've got multiple messages going out. You can lose control pretty quickly. It can have some very lasting damaging effects.
Yeah, that's so huge. And I think you've said it too. I think a couple of these points, have a point person that is very well of the plan. And then that way, if something happens, like if the media shows up, like, they're going to the point person first, not the youth pastor out there trying to ad lib it and say, oh, this, that, the other. It's like, hey, hold on, and I'll get you our point person type deal.
Yeah, and I mean, especially like press and media, they're used to that. They may try to maneuver around that, but if you just stick to the plan, they're used to that. They're going to figure it out. At the end of the day, they just want a quick soundbite or a quote or something for their story. And if they know that they're going to get that from someone, sure, they'd rather corner someone and get that on camera, because that's going to be a lot more juicy and controversial. But at the end of the day, if you stick to your plan, they're going to take that response from the communications manager or the lead pastor or whoever it is that you've assigned to give that statement. But we always knew, okay, if anything like that happens, even if a member's asking something controversial, or a protester or media or anybody, it was okay, filter it through Justin Dean, go to Justin Dean. And they had my numbers. They had, I was accessible. I was easy to get a hold of 24/7 and send that information up there through the proper channels. But, it might mean that I come back and say, hey, give me 10 minutes or give me an hour to get back to you. And I may, half the time I was pulling in a pastor, I was pulling in a deacon or an elder or even a church member to say, hey, you're the one who should respond, but I'm going to help coordinate all of this and make sure that it's done right. So it doesn't always have to be the same person making the statement. Sometimes it's better to have someone else make it. But there needs to be
one person
in place that
coordinating it. Yeah, a couple of other things I'm just thinking, and now as you're talking, these stories keep coming to my mind. But one thing I learned being a creative director is to be able to be proactive and give the news media pictures and B-roll that represented our church well. Because one time we had a story, and I think it was a positive story on an event we were doing, but they ran B-roll, the most weird, ridiculous video imagery over the top of the video. I was like, no. So from that moment on, I've always been prepared with, folders in Dropbox. So if we have somebody do a story, we provide all that. And what's funny is they normally just run with it. So we've had a story here in Kansas City, and we provided them the video, and it's almost like a promo video at that point, when they're playing really good footage of your church. And so I've had times too where I've been coming around the corner and I saw the news media exit the church, and I'm like, they just came and did a story and nobody told me about it. Like, hey, who was the reporter? What just happened? And nobody reported it to the point person. I'm like, oh no, like that's never good. So lots of things that we can learn. So I got another question here for you, but I'm curious, for those, again, of you watching, what questions would you have for Justin? Nothing's too ridiculous. I know this can sometimes be a little bit of a sensitive topic in the area of some other things, moral failures and stuff like that. But what questions, while we have the man here on this topic, would you want to throw out to him? So I'm going to go back to this question for you. When it comes to, let's jump over to like an issue like a natural disaster or some sort of terrorist attack, some sort of big event. Sadly, that seems to be happening more and more in our communities and in cities. So do you have one big piece of advice for church leaders when it comes to a big event like that?
Well, I mean, first of all, someone should be monitoring that type of stuff and paying attention. Hopefully you'll know when bad weather is coming, but certainly natural disasters, you never know, or there could be a fire or something like that. But when that's all stuff that you can predict, I mean, you can, if you live in an area that has lots of tornadoes, like, man, you should have a tornado plan in place. Okay, if something happens that affects Sunday morning or people on their way to church, what's our plan? How do we communicate about it? And it can easily be, okay, we post this on Facebook, we put a banner up on our website, maybe we enact some kind of texting service or a phone call system, whatever it is, like have those in plan, because, man, if something happens, you don't want people scrambling and meeting and coming together and saying, what's our plan? What do we do? You want us to just like, no, boom, boom, boom. Here's what we do. Let's go down the list. And, if you live in an area that gets snowed out a lot, that could be a plan. But think about what is most likely to affect your area, and then make a plan for each one ahead of time. Okay, who's actually posting the Facebook post? What's it going to say? Here's an example. It might change on the fly, but here's an example that we can pull from. Like those things are super easy to build plans around.
I love it. That's brilliant. And again, I think it all goes back to being prepared, have a plan in place, train your team, and buy the book. I mean, those are the steps. Maybe buy the book first, then go through the steps. I just
want to say, like, you're plugging the book, not me. I'm just saying.
I just think it's so important. Let's look at this. This one here, a question coming in from Tyler. He's saying that we are one of the largest, if not the largest, Celebrate Recovery in Alabama, averaging 200 to 300 people per CR. We run into the problem in the area that we are the drug church and therefore struggle with outreach for our Sunday and Wednesday services. It seems no matter what we try to combat this, we can't lose that reputation. How should we work with this? So that's a great question, Tyler. Let's put you on the spot here, Justin. Any thoughts for Tyler relative to because that's a great thing to be doing in your community, but how do you not get branded as the drug church as much as the church that loves people?
Yeah, I mean, I see the conflict. I mean, you definitely want to be open to the most people that you can, but at the same time, I kind of feel like, man, if you are the drug church, if that's your biggest ministry and it's working well and you're meeting actual needs of people in your community, then maybe there's ways that you can embrace it in a way and definitely try to broaden it and change that a bit. Like you want to control the messaging and how you want to phrase those things. But in a way, it's like, man, embrace that. Like not a lot of churches can say, hey, here's the one thing we're doing well in the community that's actually meeting a real need. Maybe you change the phrase drug church to something a little more clever, and you start using that phrase and embracing that. But frankly, like a lot of this is aligning the perception with reality, right? So if you do change that narrative, and you want to be more welcoming to families, for example, and then a family shows up and it's a bunch of drug addicts around them, that's not gonna be great. Like, I doubt that that's how it is. Like, I know what Celebrate Recovery is, and it's not just a bunch of drug addicts and things like that. So maybe that's part of it too, is educating people to say, hey, Celebrate Recovery is kind of something that everybody should be in. Like, all of us have some kind of vice, some kind of addiction, some kind of sinful behavior in our lives, and we could use redemption from that. So maybe it's some education that you can do publicly and throughout your church to explain more what Celebrate Recovery is, because honestly, it is something that everybody could, or maybe even should, be a part of on some level. So probably kind of a multi-tier approach to that, right? And I see people chiming in on the comments too. Like, definitely, it's more about just hurts and hang-ups and things like that. It's not like you're going to be sitting next to some guy shooting up in church.
Yeah.
That's probably a small percentage of the people that actually go there, if any.
Yeah, and I would say too, and you mentioned that the language is so important in driving branding and perception. And when your community grabs onto a negative phrase, like I mentioned the story about the kind of the W-2 church or the drug church, you've got to find an equally powerful phrase that more captures the positive, and train your people that every time you hear somebody say in the community, oh yeah, that's the drug church, they're saying, oh yeah, that is the church that just loves our community so much that they're changing families and they're changing history. Like, come up with powerful language that they can turn it. So now you become, if somebody says the drug church, the first thing that people think of is, yeah, they love people, and they're changing our community one person at a time.
And so we're spinning it, right? We're spinning it. And this is where people go, wow, okay, the church is turning on the spin machine. But the difference here is we're spinning it to align more with reality, because you're not the drug church. You want to spin that to the church that cares about redeeming people's hurts and hang-ups, right? So yeah, you want to create, messaging around that and train everybody on how to have that conversation, because that's how you're going to change that perception. Is when someone says the word drug church, boom, we snap back with, no, man, it's not just about that. Like, we're all about just getting closer to Jesus and being able to redeem the hurts that are in our lives. Like, I'm sure you've had some hurts and hang-ups in your lives. Maybe it's not drug addiction, but man, I know your father died last year, or this and that. Like, how are you dealing with that? And like, turn it back like that. Like, that's not, there's nothing wrong with that. That's aligning it more with the reality of what your church is actually all about. And then hopefully over time, people will get to know that that's something truly that they can go to your church and get help with.
Yeah, I'm thinking of words, branding. This is kind of my branding side kicking in, of like hope, healing, and where the conversation, you turn it right back and say, isn't it cool that thousands of people have found hope here, or families have been healed here? Yeah, isn't that so cool that our community, is totally different because of what is going on here. So, man, that is really powerful. So much good stuff, and I know we've only scratched the surface, and we've talked about the book, Justin Dean's PR Matters. I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit here at the end what's going on with that CC. I know the church conference is coming up in Atlanta here shortly. I know you're almost sold out, but I think you do more than just the conference itself. So give us a little bit of idea for church leaders, pastors, how they can get connected with you, what type of resources you have, and maybe like a next step if they want to get connected with you.
Sure. I think we definitely overlap a lot on just what we're trying to do through the conference and through our company, is really just to equip church communications leaders, not just with PR stuff, but how to do social media well, how to use digital tools well. Like, Jesus knew we would be in this context, surrounded by so much technology. We could literally reach the nations right now through the tools that we have at our disposal. Many of them are free. And so we're just teaching churches how to embrace that, how to use them well, how to spread the gospel just far and wide using these tools. And so the conference is all about that. We bring in real church practitioners who work in churches to share their best strategies. It's very hands-on, very practical, We keep the conference small, 200 people. Everyone's got their laptops on a table and are ready to work. People, walk away being able to implement the stuff they learn right away. And we do online training. You can become a member of our site at thatcc.com, and you can actually get monthly webinars, weekly interviews with all kinds of different experts and practitioners. We do courses. We have tons of free downloads. In fact, if you're a member, you can get my book for free, as and a ton of other books as well too. But the conference is coming up in September. It's our third annual conference. And it will sell out here kind of any minute. I mean, we literally only have like 5 or 6 tickets left. So, but you can get those last tickets at thatcc.com. And then actually, we haven't even really announced this yet. But luckily this isn't live or anything. So, we're actually going to make the live stream for free. So, if you can't come, it's just too late or whatever, or you can't afford a ticket and the travel and all that, we will broadcast the entire conference. Really all the main sessions. For free, and you can sign up for that now. So if you go to thatcc.com/Atlanta/live, and you can easily find your way there if you just go to the website. You can sign up and you'll get the conference for free. There's no credit card needed, anything. You can watch it online with your whole team. It's just through the generous support of our friends at Tidely, we're able to afford to do that. So we're very, very excited about that. This is the first time that we're really making a live stream for free.
That's very cool. So if you guys could help us, if you could, somebody in the comments could put some links to thatcc.com, the live stream option. It'd be cool too, as if we got off here in over the next couple of days, if we just sell that sucker out. I was hoping to be there, but I'll be out in Colorado on those dates. So hopefully here in the near future, I can get to Atlanta, or we could get you up to Kansas City, get you some good barbecue and tacos, man.
Oh yeah, sounds good.
Or a barbecue brisket taco, which can be glorious.
Dude, now you're talking.
Now we're talking. So, man, so much good stuff. I'll be posting here some links to down in the comments where you can get the book. Justin, thank you so much, man. Thank you for your heart for the local church, for pastors, for church leaders. This is going to be a huge help in just maintaining the reputation of the Big C Church. So, man, great stuff.
Thanks, Ryan. Dude, this was fun. Would love to do it again, but honestly, if anybody wants more info, I mean, heck, even if you just want the book, you can't afford it, whatever, just hit me up. I'm at Justin J. Dean pretty much everywhere. So find me and let's chat. I'd love to help.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to, we might just have to start a podcast called Taco Tuesday. We just talk about tacos. Just talk about tacos, man.
Taco.church. I got to see it.
Daniel Ermler might have that one already. If not, let's get that. They own half of the URLs in the church space. So, all right, man. Well, God bless. We're going to wrap this up, and we'll talk to you later. Let's do it again.
All right. See you guys.